We have just learned that the Archbishop of Canterbury, Justin Welby, has announced that he will resign. Now, he had faced mounting pressure to quit after his handling of the John Smyth abuse case. But the news just coming to us in the past 30 seconds or so that the Archbishop of Canterbury has resigned. We actually now have the statement through from Lambeth Palace. He says that he has sought the permission of the King, His Majesty, and has decided to resign as Archbishop of Canterbury. The Macon Review has exposed the long-maintained conspiracy of silence about the heinous abuses of John Smyth. When I was informed in 2013 and told the police had been notified, I believed wrongly that an appropriate resolution would follow. It is very clear that I must take personal and institutional responsibility for the long and re-traumatising period between 2013 and 2024. It is my duty, Justin Welby has said, my constitutional and church responsibilities, so exact timings will be decided once a review of necessary obligations has been completed, including those in England and in the Anglican Communion. I hope this decision makes clear how seriously the Church of England understands the need for change and our profound commitment to creating a safer church. As I step down, I do so in sorrow with all victims and survivors of abuse. Just to remind you, I'm reading a statement right now from the Archbishop of Canterbury, who has resigned. This is a statement that we have had from Lambeth Palace. So he continues, "The last few days have renewed my long-felt and profound sense of shame at the historic safeguarding failures of the Church of England. For nearly 12 years, I have struggled to introduce improvements. It is for others to judge what has been done. In the meantime, I will follow through on my commitment to meet victims. I will delegate all my other current responsibilities for safeguarding until the necessary risk assessment process is complete. I ask everyone to keep my wife Caroline, my children in their prayers as well. They have been my most important support throughout my ministry, and I am eternally grateful for their sacrifice." Caroline led the Sprouses programme during the Lambeth Conference and has travelled tirelessly in areas of conflict, supporting the most vulnerable, the women and those who care for them locally. I believe that stepping aside is in the best interests of the Church of England, which I dearly love and which I have been honoured to serve. I pray that this decision points us back to the love that Jesus Christ has for every one of us. For above all else, my deepest commitment is to the person of Jesus Christ, my Saviour, my God, the bearer of the sins and burdens of the world, and the hope of every person. That statement just coming from us, to us, from the Archbishop of Canterbury, who has resigned. Well, let's bring in our political correspondent, Harry Farley, who has been following this for us. Harry, the pressure had been growing on the Archbishop of Canterbury over this church abuse scandal, but please remind us now what the scandal entailed and what pressure there was on the Archbishop of Canterbury.
Yes, so this all relates to a man called John Smyth, who abused dozens of boys in the UK in the 1970s and 80s, and then went on to abuse many more in Zimbabwe and South Africa more recently than that. And the criticism in particular directed at the Archbishop of Canterbury was that he was told about John Smyth's abuse in 2013, and the criticism in a report outlined last week was that he did not do enough to pursue those allegations, to make sure that they were being properly investigated. John Smyth died in 2018, but he continued to abuse boys right up until his death in 2018, 5 years after Justin Welby knew. The Archbishop of Canterbury apologised last week for failing, in his words, to energetically pursue those allegations in 2013. He said as recently as last week that he would not be resigning. He had apologised for those failures, but as you say, that statement coming in the last few minutes. And I suppose the key paragraph from that is that he hopes this decision makes clear how seriously the Church of England understands the need for change. He had been facing calls from members of the General Synod, that's the Church of England's Parliament or National Assembly, for him to resign. And yesterday, I suppose in the most significant development, the Bishop of Newcastle, a senior figure in the Church of England, calling for him to quit, saying his position was untenable. Those calls were also being made in private, I understand, today. And Justin Welby in the last few minutes confirming that he will resign He says in the statement, "The last few days have renewed my long felt and profound sense of shame at the historic safeguarding failures of the Church of England." He goes on to say that he has struggled to introduce improvements and it is for others to judge what has been done.
Harry, thanks so much for that. We will return to you shortly, but let's bring in our religion editor, Aline McBall, who has also been following the story closely, of course. Aline, firstly, your reaction.
Yes, as Harry was saying, there has been a lot of talk behind the scenes, swirling around Lambeth Palace among clergy, certainly among survivor groups, among bishops even, as to whether the Archbishop of Canterbury's position was tenable after this report, in which he was found personally culpable. Certainly the Church had lots of questions to answer as to how John Smyth was able to perpetrate abuse over 50 years with more than 120 victims. But as Harry was saying, he knew from 2013, and yet the abuse continued. The Archbishop of Canterbury said last week when the report came out that he acknowledged more could have been done. He apologised for the abuse that was faced by the victims. He apologised for not meeting survivors soon enough. But he said he considered resigning at that point and decided against it. Well, clearly a lot of other people around him had felt that he needed to send a clearer message as to how seriously the Church takes safeguarding. And in part of his statement, he does say, "The last few days have renewed my long-felt and profound sense of shame at the historic safeguarding failures of the Church of England. For nearly 12 years, I've struggled to introduce improvements. It's for others to judge what's been done." But he says, "I believe that stepping aside is in the best interests of the Church of England, which I dearly love and which I've been honoured to serve." I think for a lot of people, that will be the right move for an institution that was struggling to convince people that it was a safe place after scandal over the years, and for the integrity of the person at the very top to be questioned, made it, for a lot of people, including some of those who spoke out to us in recent days calling for Archbishop Welby to resign, they felt it made it very difficult to defend the Church and its safeguarding procedures, which, as Archbishop Welby says, have improved over the past 11 years, but clearly there are still huge failings, and these are recent failings that we're talking about, and that, I think, is why Archbishop Welby felt he needed to go to the palace today, speak to the King and ask his permission to step down.
Yes, take us through that process that the Archbishop would have had to have gone through, Aline. He did have to go to see the King in order to get his permission, and then now he's resigned, and what will happen next?
Yes, I mean, in some ways it's uncharted territory, but we know that he did have to ask the permission of the King. And now what happens is something that would have happened in a year or so's time, which is quite a long period of sort of discernment where various calls are put out as to what the public, as what churchgoers want from the leadership of the Church. This actually is something that we had talked about with the Church quite recently as something that would happen when Justin Welby was due to step down at the end of next year. I don't know as yet, because as I say, we're in uncharted territory, as to whether that would all be sped up. This was supposed to happen, the selection of a next Archbishop was supposed to happen while Justin Welby was still in his position, and so a process that would have taken 6 months may be accelerated. I just don't know at this point.
And Aline, can you remind our viewers, particularly those around the world, about the role of the Anglican Church here in the UK and also around the world, how many members it has?
Yes, well, it is the established church in this country. It has a very privileged constitutional position in this country. There are, for example, bishops that sit automatically in the House of Lords, but it is bigger than just the Church of England. The Anglican Communion is vast. It has had its difficulties in the past with divisions because you're talking about a church that has an imprint on areas with very different cultures, very conservative areas, much more liberal areas. They came together just a couple of years ago, bishops from around the world, deep divisions there, but they still looked to the Archbishop of Canterbury as the head, the person who they looked to in many ways. Some had said it was difficult to look at the Archbishop of Canterbury for guidance when there had been so many scandals, where there had been so much division, but certainly it has a huge imprint, and certainly Archbishop Welby cared about trying to hold things together. It is, even in this country, a divided institution, and I think for a lot of the time he was in charge, it was very difficult, I think, for the Archbishop to hold very principled lines one way or the other on arguments, for example, on same-sex unions, because a lot of his priority was just trying to hold things together in a very divided institution and a hugely divided communion.
Aleem, thank you so much. We'll be back with you shortly as well.